Well, I've been a parkie all my life, a tree hugger. I started out in this field when I was 16 years old, and I was very fortunate to have a director in my hometown put me. I was like living under his supervision, and took me under his wing and went to board meetings with him. I was in on finances, great opportunities. I knew the questions to ask my professors when I went to college, and so I majored in Parks and Recreation, and then I did my PhD doctorate in natural resource management. The job I just retired from, in 30 years, I was the CEO, president of the Illinois Association of Park Districts, working with 2,200 elected park board members, doing the training programs. I wrote a couple books in Parks and Recreation and published over 100 magazine articles, and I'm still learning though. I hope that if I'm elected, that knowledge and experience will come forward to be of assistance in making our park district more efficient and effective. I was interested a long time ago for running for the board, but I thought it would be a conflict with my positions. Since all the park districts were members of our association, we had about 400 park districts. Springfield was one of them, and that could at least appear like a conflict anyway. But I've always been interested in board. Like I said, I train boards, but I know that it'd be an effective board. You're, regardless of your knowledge and background, you have to be a team player. You're one of 7 members, and so I plan on fulfilling that role.
My name's Janine Toman, and I basically grew up in the parks my whole life. I grew up in Oak Park in Western Springs, and I went to Ridgeland Common Pool, ice skating, swimming, softball. Basically, I'm just a park junkie. I know parks for youth can save kids' lives. It literally saved mine. My brother and I had a little skirmish at home one day. He went through a glass door window and had to go to the hospital, and I was supposed to go to a softball game, and I was really rattled as a kid. And my dad said, "What do you have to do today?" "Well, I've got a softball game, Dad." Go. So I immersed myself, and I knew that my family on the team basically helped me get through that tough little crisis. And I know kids without, in a one-parent family, can look at the sports teams as another family. Sports is really crucial for kids, and the park system has wonderful opportunities for that. I'd like to continue that, work with that, make sure we nurture that as well. From the stroller to the wheelchair mentality, pretty much. Using the parks. I went to U of I and I majored in Parks and Recreation, and it was a passion to stay close to the grass, and I didn't want to leave sports and recreation too far behind, so I majored in it, and had the wonderful opportunity of meeting Mr. Flickinger here when I was in college, so we go back about 30 years too, and we have, he's a wonderful resource and wealth of information, and it'd be wonderful to work with him as well if I had the opportunity. Coming to Springfield, I knew only my cousins after graduation, and so Springfield adopted me basically. And 3 things when you go to a new town: you look to where you can meet people, meet and greet, and get involved, and the parks are one of them. I went to find out what was going on in the parks: softball, volleyball. I went to scout out some teams and said, "Hey, if you want to substitute, I know my place." You sit on the bench, you get in the game, and you try to contribute. So you work your way up. I'm not a star by no means, but I'm certainly a player, and a passionate player at that. I have a wonderful gift of gab and energy that I'd like to take to the board. My background at the state for 20 years in management, operations, managed a driver facility, been a fiscal officer, auditor. I can look at the books, look at operations, see how we're doing, enhance where we're going, grants, whatnot. So that's my game plan, and I'd like to offer that out there.
Tina Jannazzo. I'm currently on the park board. The biggest reason that I want to still run for the park board is that there's so much left to do. We're having some difficulties with some money issues, some labor issues, and one of the first things that I did when I was on the board the very first meeting, they were talking about the solar panel and the wind turbine. And my experience through the school district, I told them, this is way too high. My very first meeting, it was really nervous because it was like the day I was introduced to the board. I spoke up, and they lowered the price of the wind turbine and the PV, which was still pretty high, but so that was one of the initial things I did on the board. I was one of the only people that voted no against the budget for the last board, or the last year's budget, which was the only budget I've had to vote on so far. One of the reasons I did that is we are borrowing, we're bonding out a lot of money, we're putting a lot of money up front on projects, and we are kind of overstepping instead of slowing down and building over the long term and making sure that it will adjust with society. Some of the vision of past park boards hasn't really been inclusive of all of the city. I think that we're missing out on a lot of kids. I work as a teacher at Grant Middle School, and I take my kids to Washington Park because it's within walking distance, so we do a field trip every year. And a lot of those kids, it's the first time they've ever been in the woods, which is amazing because Springfield has trees everywhere, but they've just never been in the woods. They've never planted anything. They haven't worked and created anything for themselves out of nature. So it's very important to me to get more of those kids in the parks. My grandma, she's older, can't really get around as well. Southwind's going to be a neat park for her because we can actually take her out there, and there's restrooms that are built for her and things like that. So I'm very excited about that. I really want to see some programming at Southwind, though. There's really not a lot still, even though we have the facility, there's not a lot for people with limited abilities to do or elderly to do in the parks. So that's one of the things I want to bring. There's a thing called Almost Golf. That's one of the things I want to bring to the park district, and I'll explain that later. But it's just for people with limited abilities, just more things for them to do in the parks. Just the real reason I'm running is to get more people outside, more people in the parks, and do it fiscally responsibly.
A little bit of my background is that I was a reporter for most of my career, about 6 years, and then I've worked now at the state for both the state treasurer and the Illinois House Republicans for a total of about 3 years. And in those roles, I've been able to observe government for the most part and report on it or be staff to government officials and people who have been elected. And at various times, and I'm sure many of you observe that too, as you're covering different stories, you think, how would I do that? What decision would I make? And I found that the opportunity came up to, if the opportunity ever came up to run for one of the government bodies in my community, I would like to take a look at that. When it comes to the park district, I grew up near Isles Park, which I grew up on South 6th Street, which is a block away from Isles Park. And Isles Park was mainly my backyard because 6th Street, as you know, is a highway. And so that's where we went to play. And so that was a big part of my childhood. I now live a couple of blocks from Washington Park. And it's a place, as soon as the weather today, when I stepped outside, I thought today is a perfect day to get back out to the park after the winter. And so I have just enjoyed the programming at the parks in Springfield. I'm getting married in August, and we're deciding that we're going to stay in the community. My fiance isn't originally from here, but I think that it's an opportunity for me to get involved in something that I believe in and try to make it better than it is today. And part of my experience, my background is sort of different than the other folks at the table, but I believe a big part of what I can contribute is on the marketing side, the communication side, and trying to figure out and communicate with the community and seeing what's working and what's not through promotion, through looking at programs and seeing if it's working for the folks in our community or it's not. And if it's not, looking to some other programs that people have to offer. Because I think the parks are a great thing, just like all of these guys say. I mean, getting outside and playing, going to the activities that we have. And just on the fiscal side, one of the things I've encountered on the campaign trail is that people aren't very familiar with what the park district is. What do you do? What are you going to do when you get elected to the park board? And then when I explain the size of the budget, all the facilities that encompass the park district, some people are surprised that the zoo is there and the ballparks are there and the golf courses are there, the parks are there, and they offer dance lessons and they offer all these things. Well, if they don't know about it, they're paying for it, certainly, if they pay property tax or sales tax in our community. And so we need to make sure that they know about it. If they like it, they like it. If they don't, then we can make some adjustments. But that's basically what I'm doing.